Welcome to my afternoon tea time on a Sunday with my favorite cup, the stars. I've been thinking a lot about this concept of burnout, and I've actually never loved this concept. Um, because oftentimes when I heard about burnout, particularly within the context of um, organizations and workplaces, it often came down to this issue of self care. Like, oh, maybe there's something I should be doing more of, or less of. Or I should be getting more sleep, or taking my vitamins, or exercising more, or stop scrolling after a certain hour. Um, and, I wouldn't be burned out. But the truth is that burnout is often uh, multi-factor and more complex than that. And a lot of it has to do with systems, social systems like the one we live in, capitalist economies, um, as well as organizations and how they're designed and they're set up, and a lot of the unconscious stuff that happens in organizations behind the scenes. And so I burned out and I was trying to change the world. I was doing a lot of social change work. Um, and the confusing part is I thought I was doing everything right because I considered myself to be a very balanced person. This story became really clear to me. This concept around burnout became more clear to me because in 2017, 2019, right before the world paused, um, I was in a senior executive role, a senior vice president. My title at the time, when I left, I was working for a pretty well-known major global nonprofit, was uh, a chief transformation officer. And I was the trusted advisor and president to the CEO at the time on all matters related to leadership development, organizational development, and change. I was also outside of my work and role within the organization. Um, I was deeply involved in the future of work slash responsive org movement, where we were really challenging old, outdated, industrialized models of organizations and organization design, and really moving towards a more human centered, people first, open, agile, and transparent way of working and living. And so, within the context of the org. And so, at that time, in that role as Chief Transformation Officer, I was supporting leaders to work across a variety of diverse stakeholders, government agencies, nonprofits in the communities, philanthropies, foundations, as well as businesses who were all connected with us, my organization, around fighting poverty in New York City. And so generally, my days look something like commuting. At the time, I had moved from Brooklyn and I was living in Westchester County. So I was commuting from Rye into the city, into Grand Central. My days were filled with back to back meetings. Those meetings sometimes were strategy sessions, coaching, delivering a workshop, planning meetings across different functions. I was mentoring, supervising a department, many people in a department. I was uh, typically, because my days were filled with back to back meetings, if there was a workshop I needed to design, I was either doing that early in the morning or I was doing that in the evenings on the train. And so, if I wanted to exercise or optimize my sleep or do any of those things, right, my life had to be very structured and organized. So it was a rigorous schedule, if you will, in that role, in that senior leadership role. And so what I noticed though, at the time, right, I could feel myself increasingly getting more tired um, and just trying to like pull myself through most of what was happening. is that no matter what change effort or initiative we were working to get off the ground, there was often this tug of war, but around power and authority, right? Like, yes, we want to innovate. We want to listen to the people, right? We want to listen to the people who are closest to the work. But then there'd be an energetic or power pull or play back to the other side. Well, we really know best, or, we have the data, right? Whether it was the board or a researcher we would hire to do something, or leadership team discussions, of which I was a part. So there was that tug of war around trust the people, don't trust the people, right? Love the people, but maybe they don't really have everything that we need. So that energetic tug was always happening. Um, and the truth is, there was also um, covert dynamics around race and power. At my organization, we had a very large board of predominantly, let's just say, well resourced, wealthy people from the corporate sector. Banking, real estate, consulting, so on and so forth, law, so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, they were a powerful group of people. So even though me and my colleagues, right, we had a very diverse staff, but when it came to our board, it wasn't that diverse, right? There were a lot of white folks, white men, bankers. There were some women. We were making some headway in that regard, and a few people of color on that board. So the truth is that ultimately the worldview, the point of view, the value set of that board, when it came to big strategy and fundraising and all the things we were doing around our big goal, related to housing insecurity, food insecurity, educational goals, right, in some of the poorest districts, in New York City. Ultimately, our voices were heard, but oftentimes at the end of the day, we were not the final word or the final say on what was considered legitimate. And so the pattern continued, right, of this ideological, if you will, struggle that was always at play. And I was complicit in it, right? Like I was working hard, like in the system, supporting leadership and organizational development, helping to not only midwife the strategy, but to support the strategy being implemented, not only inside the organization, but amongst our various stakeholders. We were very much focused on collective impact and working together across our differences towards this goal of making life better for all New Yorkers. And my body started to feel it. I wouldn't have used the word burnout at the time. That wasn't a popular term back then. But my sleep, right? That wired but tired feeling right before you go to bed when you know you should be calm, but you're not, right? But what's happening is like your cortisol is raising. My stomach, in terms of my digestion, I would start to feel, I felt like for several years in that role, I often felt queasy or nauseous. And so I was trying to focus on my nutrition, right? Eating whole foods and drinking the water and doing the things, trying to get my sleep. But that feeling was always in me. And so I felt like and believed that there was something more that I needed to do to balance myself, to find balance in my body and in my day and in my work life, and to try to find moments wherever I could just to catch my breath and to recenter. Um, but then one day, it became a little bit more clear to me that this was not just about me and how I was managing my time or trying to manage my energy or trying to read or learn about the most recent um, body hack, right? We were all about the wearables, right? They were really coming to play in body hacks. And so um, it all became very clear to me at a meeting. There was a strategy session that we had with the board, and we were all excited because we were going to really put a stake in the ground and articulate this sort of citywide vision for what we really wanted, right? We were refreshing our mission and vision. We were refreshing our strategy. We were going to have a big, hairy, audacious goal, right? Around what we wanted to do for and on behalf of New Yorkers. And we got to this moment in the strategy session that I was co-facilitating with a consultant we'd hired, with some board members and other stakeholders and leaders who were in the room, around whether our goal was to create New Yorkers who were more self-sufficient or more prosperous. It came down to this word choice. What were we going to decide? Did we want New Yorkers who were self-sufficiency? Were we going for self-sufficiency? Or were we going for prosperity? And there was an intense debate and conversation in the room, of which I was a part. And ultimately, our board, one of our senior board members, I think he must have been board chair at that moment, he said, I don't believe that our goal is to make people prosperous. I believe that the goal of this organization is to make people more sufficient. And he said something really eloquent and articulate, and he had a reason and rationale for it. But at the end of the day, he won. His point of view won. And I believe a lot of that had to do with his power and position, not only in the system, but in that organization. And it was at that moment that I realized, like, oh, the most fundamental beliefs, my core beliefs that I have about the world, about marginalized groups, about low-income New Yorkers, about people who need our help and support, my core beliefs are very, very different from his. I believe that each individual has a right to aim for prosperity and to envision a life of prosperity, however they define it. There's no one definition of that prosperity. But he believed in self-sufficiency. Like, our goal is just to support people to be self-sufficient. We can't promise people prosperity. And I never really saw it as a promise, as much as a vision, as a hope, a dream, and an intention from which we could then all organize our efforts around the same outcome. So our outcomes, our ultimate outcome, wasn't even the same. And so it was at that moment that I had the realization that we are holding two different, completely vibrational frequencies. What we're holding in consciousness in terms of our core beliefs, our values, the set of assumptions upon which we act in the world are at odds. And I can use my influence, I can use my intellect, I can negotiate, persuade, I can argue with this person. But at the end of the day, what was believing that we can get in a room and try to create strategies and outcomes and align on this from the outside in would have been an exercise in futility at that moment, because he had positional power and authority by virtue of his identity in the room. And ultimately, he won. So our strategy ended up being focused on the self-sufficiency of low-income New Yorkers rather than the prosperity of low-income New Yorkers. And that is when I realized that this consistent attempt to try to move the chairs on the deck around to create change and transformation in the world can lead us in circles. And it's a little bit of an illusion unless there's a more fundamental shift in consciousness around what we believe is possible and how we view ourselves, the world, our brothers and sisters, the people we're trying to serve and help. And so at that moment, it became a light bulb went off for me. And the cost was that, I'm not tired and exhausted and at night feeling wired and tired and feeling queasy um, because I'm burned out. And I just need to reorganize my schedule and my energy and how I manage my energy. There's a systemic issue here that is deeper and a little bit more spiritual than what I'm realizing. And a lot of it has to do with sort of hidden, covert dynamics that were operating at the soul level. There was a fundamental misalignment of what my soul really believes about people and human dignity and life and abundance, really. I was coming from a consciousness of abundance, and this board member, as well as a few others, he wasn't alone. And this is not about attacking anybody, right? But it's about naming that there were others there who were operating from a level of cautiousness or constraint or sort of a lack consciousness and not wanting to quote over promise. And so that's my reflection today as I think about burnout. I burned out trying to change the world. Um, because of hidden dynamics that were really at play in the room around power and identity and race and fairness and justice and a misalignment of values and vision in the world. And so I ask you, how are you feeling in your life right now? Whether it's at work, in the world, in community, are you in the room with people negotiating and compromising and trying to figure out the outcome and the goal, right? Are you in a coalition? Are you in a boardroom or a leadership team? And are you trying to create change from the outside in with the setup without actually mining and getting underneath some of those hidden assumptions? And do you have what you need to really ask the questions and within yourself even, right? Because I was complicit at the time. I realized that I wasn't just one theory, framework, organizational development tool or template away from transformation or change, that there was something much, much deeper that I needed to address in terms of my own misalignment with what was happening at the time. And so I invite you to sit with that question, outside in or inside out. How are you going about making the change and the transformations in your life, in your leadership, in your home, in your community?